My name's Mark and you're listening to Headstraight. Hello you lot and welcome back. Today we're going to answer the question, how do I cope when life hits hard? Because sometimes life doesn't just challenge you, it hurts you. Not in a this is difficult kind of a way, in a way that lands and stays with you. Something changes, a relationship ends, someone lets you down, something you trusted doesn't hold, or something ends that you weren't ready to lose. And whatever it is for you, that loss, that shift, that thing that's not how it used to be, that's what stays with you. You feel it when things go quiet. You feel it when you're on your own. You feel it in those moments that should feel normal, but for some reason just don't. Because something's changed, and you can't just think your way out of it. You can't fix it with a plan. You can't push through it and come out the other side in a week. It doesn't work like that. And this is the point where a lot of the usual advice just doesn't help. Stay positive. Just keep yourself busy. Don't dwell on it and you'll be all right. Now it all sounds fine until you're the one sitting with that loss, that shift, that thing that still feels off. Because when something actually hurts, those things just don't touch it. They just sit on the surface. And underneath, it's still there. That weight, that ache, that sense that something isn't how it used to be. And you might try to carry on, keep things normal, stay distracted, tell yourself that it'll pass. And sometimes you can do that for a while. But it has a way of coming back. It comes back in the quieter moments, in unexpected reminders, in reactions that feel stronger than they should. And then you're left with the question, what do I actually do with this? Not how to fix it, but how do I sit with this loss, this change, this thing that still hurts without it taking over everything? Because this isn't about bouncing back quickly. This is about getting through something that's changed the way that things feel. So if that's where you are, dealing with something that hasn't just challenged you, but actually hurt you, you're not doing it wrong. You're responding to something real. And this episode is about how you get through that without forcing it to be over before it's ready. So what is this really? Because it doesn't always get labelled clearly. It's not always about something obvious. It's not always about big events that everyone recognises. But what you're dealing with here is a form of grief. And not just the kind that people talk about when someone dies. Grief shows up in lots of different ways. It can be a relationship ending or changing in the way that you didn't expect. It can be someone letting you down in a way that shifts how you see them. It can be family stuff that's never been quite right, but suddenly starts to hit harder. It can be losing a version of your life that you thought you were heading towards. Maybe plans that don't happen, things that don't work out, expectations that quietly fall apart. And this is the part that throws people, because the thing you're grieving might still be there. The person is still around. The situation still exists. Your life is still moving. But something about it has changed. And you feel that. That gap between what it was and what it is now. And that's what makes it confusing. Because it's not clean. There's no clear ending. There's no moment when you can say, it's over now. It's more like something has shifted and you're left adjusting to it. And that kind of grief tends to hang around longer because it doesn't have a clear shape. It shows up in different ways. Some days it's quiet. Some days it hits harder. Some days it catches you off guard. And you might question it. Why am I still feeling this? Shouldn't I be over this by now? Especially if it doesn't look like something that other people would call grief. But the impact isn't measured by how it looks. It's measured by what it means to you. What changed? What you lost? What's different now? And when something matters, its absence or its change is going to be felt. That's not you being dramatic. That's you responding to something that had value. And once you start to see it like that, it starts to make a bit more sense. Not easier, but clearer to you. Because instead of asking, what's wrong with me? You can start to recognize something mattered and now it's different. And that's something that you have to move through, not something that you can just switch off. So when something hurts like this, what do most people do? Well, they try to hold it together. They keep going, they stay busy, they act like they're handling it. And on the surface, that can look like strength. You show up, you get on with things, you don't let it stop everything. But underneath, it's still there, because holding it together isn't the same as dealing with it. And there's a pressure here that a lot of people feel without really noticing it. The pressure to be okay, to not let it affect you too much, to not fall apart, to not make it bigger than it needs to be. So you manage it. You keep it contained. You distract yourself. You tell yourself that it's not that bad. And for a while, that can work. But it comes at a cost, because when you don't let yourself feel something properly, it doesn't disappear. It just gets pushed down. And feelings that are pushed down don't stay quiet. They show up in other ways, in your mood, in your reactions, in how much energy you've got, in moments where something small suddenly feels like too much. And then there are other ways that people handle it. Pulling away from people, keeping things to themselves, not wanting to talk about it. Or maybe they go the other way, acting like it doesn't matter, brushing it off, telling themselves that they've moved on, when actually they haven't. Now all of that makes sense, because it's about protecting yourself. When something hurts, you try to find a way to carry it without it taking over. But here's the problem. When everything is focused on holding it together, there's no space to actually process what's happened. And that's why it lingers. Not because you're doing something wrong, but because you're trying to cope with it without giving it anywhere to go. And this is where the idea of staying strong can actually make things harder. Because real strength here isn't about keeping it all contained. It's about being able to acknowledge that it hurt without immediately trying to fix it, minimize it, or move past it too quickly. Because if you skip that part, it doesn't go anywhere. It just waits and comes back later. So let's steady this. Because when something hurts like this, it can feel like you're just not handling it. Like you should be coping better. Like you should be further along by now. Like it shouldn't still be affecting you in the way that it is. And that thought can make it even heavier. But what you're experiencing here isn't you failing to cope. It's you responding to something that mattered. When something has value, when it means something to you, when it was part of how you saw things, and then it changes or it's lost, your system reacts. It reacts emotionally, mentally, and sometimes physically as well. And that reaction can feel really overwhelming. You might feel like you've gone backwards, like you've lost your footing, like things that felt steady before don't feel the same now. But that's not you falling apart. That's you adjusting to something that's changed. An adjustment never feels neat. It doesn't feel controlled. It can feel messy, uneven, and like it comes in waves. Some days you feel okay. Some days it's harder again. And that can feel really frustrating because you want it to move in a straight line. You want to feel like you're getting through it in a way that makes sense. But this kind of process doesn't move like that. It moves in its own way. And the more you try to force it to be quicker, cleaner, or easier, the more resistance you tend to feel. So instead of asking, why am I still feeling like this? A more accurate way to look at it is this. This is still affecting me because it mattered. Not because you're weak, not because you're stuck, but because something real has changed for you. And your system is still taking time to catch up with that. And here's the part that often gets missed. You don't have to rush this. You don't have to force yourself to be okay before you actually are. You don't have to win this by getting over it quickly. What you're doing is moving through it at your own pace in a way that allows it to actually settle rather than just be pushed aside. And that's what eventually makes it lighter. Not pretending it didn't matter, but allowing it to be what it is until it takes up less space. So when something feels like this, heavy, lingering, not something that you can move past quickly, what actually helps? Not to fix it, but just to get through it in a way that doesn't make it harder. Well, the first thing is when it feels intense, bring it back to something simple. Because when emotions spike, your brain can start running ahead of itself. Thinking about everything at once, trying to make sense of it all, jumping between what's happened and what it means. And that's when it can all feel really overwhelming. So instead of trying to solve it, just ground yourself in what's right in front of you right now. Your breathing, what you can see around you, what you can physically feel. Nothing complicated, just bringing yourself back into the moment so the feeling doesn't take over. The second thing is give it somewhere to go. Because if it stays contained inside your head, then it tends to loop. The same thoughts, the same feelings, going round and round again and again. So let it out in some way. Now this might be writing it down, saying it out loud, or talking to somebody that you trust. Not to fix it, but just to express it. Because once you've put it into words, it often feels a bit less stuck, a bit less like it's just sitting there, unresolved. And the third thing, find your own way of acknowledging it. Not something formal, just something that marks the fact that something mattered, that something changed, that something had an impact on you. And that could be as simple as taking a moment to reflect on it properly, writing a few honest sentences about what it meant, or even just allowing yourself to sit with it without distraction. Because when something is acknowledged, it tends to settle more naturally, rather than feeling like it's being pushed aside. And one thing to keep in mind through all of this, you don't have to do all of it. You don't have to do any of it perfectly. You're just finding small ways to support yourself whilst you're in it. Not rushing to get out of it, just making it more manageable as you move through. So, if you take anything from this episode, let it be this. You don't have to rush this. You don't have to make it smaller than it is. You don't have to push it away before it's ready to settle. Because when something has an impact on you, it's going to take time to move through. And that's not a problem. That's just how it works. So, if something has been sitting with you for longer than you expected, or showing up in ways that you didn't expect, that doesn't mean that you're stuck. It means something mattered and you're still adjusting to that. So instead of trying to get rid of it or forcing yourself to be okay, just bring it back to something simpler. Let yourself acknowledge it, even if it's just quietly, even if it's just to yourself. This actually affected me. This mattered more than I've been letting on. Because once you stop minimizing it, you give yourself a bit more space to process it properly. Not all at once, not in a hurry, just gradually. So let me give you something to take away. I want you to think of one thing that you've been brushing off or telling yourself it's not that big of a deal. And just allow yourself to recognize it for what it is. Not exaggerating it, not analyzing it, just acknowledging that it actually hurt. And that's it. Because sometimes that's the point where things start to shift. Not when you fix it, but when you stop pretending that it didn't matter. Now, something else tends to happen when you go through something like this. Even when the intensity settles a bit, things don't always feel the same as they did before. The way you see people can shift. The way you trust can feel different. The way you connect might not come as easily. Not because you've changed completely, but because something in your experience has. And that can leave you feeling a bit unsure of where you stand with people. So in the next episode, we're going to take a proper look at that. What happens to relationships after loss, after change, and how you find your way through that without shutting down or pulling away. So, are you up for it? Of course you are.